Yes, I am. I am here, Giles, and thank you very much
Thank you very much.
for segueing to me. As Julian's mentioned, I've been asked to speak very briefly on two of the key economic stimulus factors that we have been working on, and we've been working on these since sort of May, June period. So for about 8 to 9 months, considering the quantification, considering the impacts, and considering the methodologies and how to implement them. Let me just explain the importance of these two, because obviously, as you mentioned, Giles, the priority is to enable performance to actually start. That has to be the first priority to get us back into stage 3, stage 4, socially distanced performance, and then importantly to stage 5, where fuller audiences will be allowed, because that is when the economic conditions for most performances will be dependent upon. However, there is a series of factors that are very important, hard on the heels of that enablement. Firstly, to ensure that productions can come on, and that is where the insurance factor comes into play. And the second is, how do you, when you enable them to come on, how do you stimulate them in sufficient quantity to be able to get this sector back up and running quickly? The benefits of doing that, I'm sure, are very apparent to everybody on this call, but in quantification terms, we estimate that the value of a fully functioning theatre sector is approximately £5 billion per annum to the economy as a whole, divided 1/3 in the actual sales of tickets and items through the theatre, 1/3 in terms of the economic multiplier into hospitality, and 1/3 approximately in terms of stimulus to tourism. So this is a very sizable sum. Importantly, it is getting shows on which will, in the current circumstances, enable the freelancers and the self-employed to get the flow of earnings that they have been so sadly missing out on in the main for the past year. And that has been the message from government, which is, if we wish to address this problem, then the best way to address it is by actually putting shows on. And you'll obviously have seen the sector trying to do that through October into November, when a lot of us were closed, then into December trying to get it on, then being closed down. So the track record on that front is not massively encouraging. And then thirdly, export earnings mustn't be forgotten. We estimate that we generate in export value certainly around £250 million per annum from the theatre sector, and being up and running, producing new shows that we're going to export is critical for getting that flow restarted, reflecting our global preeminence in the sector. As to the two factors that we've been working on, and I'm here in conjunction with Martin Scott, the CFO of SALT. He and I have been very much leading the effort on these two subjects, and will chip in if I forget something. But insurance is what I describe as the enabler. We know from repeated and almost daily contact with the insurance marketplace that a key component of insurance will not be available, certainly not prior to 2022, which is insurance for business interruption and cancellation. For our sector, that's critical. We depend on third-party investors to get our shows up and running. We know from our survey of members that approximately 80% by economic value of activity will not come back until some form of cancellation insurance is in place. Otherwise, our investors and our producers will sit on their hands. They won't take the risk. We've done extensive sizing of this, working very closely with a supportive DCMS who understand entirely this issue, and we have quantified that the requirement, if, for example, the whole industry was locked down for 3 months, a further 3 months, once it was up and running, which we consider to be the outer end of the challenge that we're facing, then for the whole industry, once we sort of mitigated our costs and once we considered very closely how we run our businesses as efficiently as possible, then the loss as an industry would be incurring is 179 million. So that is the scale of the indemnity, and I do emphasise indemnity, that we would be we are currently asking for the Exchequer to consider in a structure very similar to the film and television indemnity structure, following the same pattern, which would mean that we as an industry were paying for the premiums on that to the government. So this is not a one-way street. This is asking for government backing in disaster situation, and the industry would be paying premiums for that. That discussion is in progress. As I say, DCMS are very supportive, and we're waiting update as to how the detailed discussion with government, particularly with the Exchequer, is taking place. The key point to add on that is there has been a fair amount of discussion in general fora and indeed in the House about insurance not being considered until it is literally the last barrier. And that was the case in film and television. It literally was the last barrier. The concern for us as an industry is we know it will take time. Once everybody is agreed that it's needed, it will take time to put in place. And if we wait until stage 5 is green lit, then the industry will pause for another 6 months potentially while the scheme is coming into arrangement. We all have lead times, etc., etc. So for us, the issue should be considered well in advance to it becoming the very final barrier. The second, and I should add that globally there have been various moves comparable to this. So Germany has put in place an indemnity scheme of some 2 billion euros. Austria has, and Holland has just announced one as well. Obviously, there are different support arrangements that are going through the American legislature, which would bring a sizable amount of funding to theatre. The second factor that we're working on is the theatre tax relief, which has become a very important part of the ecology of theatre production, providing stimulus for work to be put on, comparable to the film tax relief. This has been in place since 2014. The importance of this sitting alongside the insurance is an enabler, and as insurance work won't come on, then the question is how do we get it on as quickly as possible so people get employed, so that work gets flowing, so that audiences can come in and get all the educational and health and relaxation benefits that theatre can provide. Our proposals here are that during the course of the current tax year, obviously the calls upon TTR of the Exchequer have been minimal. No work has been going on. So what our proposals consider is how one could advantageously take the underspend from this year, conjoin it with what is hopefully budgeted for next year to in effect double the rate of relief for a period of time that could be between 1 year to 2 years. There is quite complex mechanics in this in terms of the percentage of the relief or what items qualify for relief, which I won't go into here. It's a PhD subject all of its own. But the headline is that we've put forward proposals that in effect see the rate of contribution from TTR into productions doubling for a period of time, which from our discussions with the industry would provide considerable impetus for producers, for investors to start accelerating show plans so that we're coming up onto stages quicker. And TTR importantly applies right the way across the United Kingdom. It applies right the way across the sectors of not-for-profit, commercial. So it is a very broad spread, even-handed. It applies to the largest production and it can apply to the smallest production. So we think it is a very important measure and tool to stimulate activity rapidly. Once we're into stage 4, it will accelerate productions coming on. Similarly, in stage 5, it will accelerate the quantity of productions and therefore the amount of employment, the amount of activity that will take place. Obviously, what we're talking about is a limited time period because after, say, 1 year, 2 years, we would anticipate things moving back to normal. So, Giles, that is a very brief summary on those two headings. Martin, have I missed anything out that you think is particularly relevant?
No, covered perfectly.
Thank you, Martin. And I promise you I didn't pay Martin to say that.
Thank you, Rupert. That was very well. It's a very complicated subject, and when you talk about insurance, we are talking about confidence, are we not? We're talking about confidence to producers, confidence that they can actually put something together with the backing, with the underwriting. Is that right?
That is correct. And as you can appreciate, with our stop, start, confidence has sort of ebbed away considerably, and therefore there is a temptation among producers, a temptation among investors to say, well, let's wait for a couple of years. Why would we risk suddenly being closed down, either regionally or nationally, for a lockdown? Because we know the losses are considerable. It's a risky endeavour, theatre, as we all know, to then overlay the normal risks with the risk of being closed for periods of 1 week, 2 weeks, 3 months, however long, really makes the economic equation very unattractive. So if insurance is in place, then producers and investors at least know, in those extreme circumstances where closures are being forced upon us, there is somewhere to go to get cover for one's underlying costs. That's all we're looking for. We're not looking for reimbursement of profit. It's reimbursement of actual costs incurred in terms of compensating staff, in terms of marketing having been paid for and now having to be trashed. So that's the underpinning, Giles, of the confidence that's needed by a standard insurance scheme. The good news is that the insurance market is being more positive on other elements of insurance, such as public liability, obviously on employer liability and D&O cover, which is why our representations to government are very much focused on the single strand, the crucial strand of insurance that won't be there, which relates to business interruption.